Roughly 9 months ago, I finally got my hands on the Fujifilm X-Pro3, and I wanted to love this camera. I really did. I was enamored by the body shape, the color, and the screen, all of which I thought would potentially change my photography. And it technically did, but I can't really say for the better or worse. Because although there were many upsides to working with a camera like the X-Pro3, there were also many downsides. And in my experience, I felt like this camera could be a niche photographer's dream or another photographer's nightmare. This is 9 months with the X-Pro3. The viewfinder experience. What separates the Fujifilm X-Pro3 from many other modern cameras is the viewfinder experience. The X-Pro3 was built to be a viewfinder camera. This is most obvious from the design of the screen itself, hidden and available only when pulled down. Now, obviously, you don't need an X-Pro3 to do this. Technically, you can turn off the screen for another camera if you want the same effect. And many older film cameras are viewfinder only as well, so the X-Pro3 isn't special in that case. But it is a dive back into an older form of shooting. And before using this camera, I had this sort of idea in my head that the X-Pro series and the X100 series were sort of the street photography cameras. And obviously there are Leicas and whatnot, but ain't nobody can afford those. So I wanted to try the X-Pro3 out and see how it affected my photography. And I've got to be honest, the X-Pro3 is good, but there's a lot of room for improvement. Here's a quick run through of things I've noticed when using this camera. 1. The screen is awesome for waist level shots, however lacking if you want to shoot vertically. The screen cable thing is also notorious for breaking if you're too forceful with it or you have a fragile one. This has led me to not pull it out fully and use the screen only at waist level for fear that it might break. 2. The extra button next to the Q button is pretty useful and I kind of wish some of my other cameras had this. 3. Shooting through the viewfinder can be annoying if you wear hats. I noticed that I had to switch my entire hand position upside down when shooting vertically so as to not bump my hat. 4. Shooting waist level has also forced me to change my hand position. Originally, I'd still take pictures with my index finger when shooting on cameras like the X100V, but the X-Pro3 has changed that. Because the X-Pro3 is a bit bigger, it's a bit more stressful on my wrist to kind of hold the camera in that position. So now I point the lens with my left hand and press the shutter with my thumb. This has ironically spilled over into how I shoot with my other cameras and can be a little bit quicker. And 5, the big one, viewfinders are slower, not faster. This is the biggest difference I've noticed in my time with the X-Pro3. The viewfinder experience is a slower mode of photography. Because with the screen, all you have to do is lift up your camera and take the picture. However, a viewfinder takes more time to look through the hole and compose the shot. So I don't know why, but this is something that took me a while to realize. I thought because the X-Pro series were known to be good for street photography that they had to be fast, and that you could just walk through the city and fire away seamlessly and not worry too much about that stuff, because that's how I use the X100V after all. It's a quicker, more rapid, candid camera, and I rarely found myself needing to stop or slow down. Now, you could probably still do that with the X-Pro2, but the X-Pro3 is a bit different. And so putting the camera to your eye takes a whole extra second, and then needing to frame the shot after that takes another extra second. These extra seconds almost force you to slow down, stop, and be more predictive in your photography. And with that process comes a more intentional form of taking photos. You're no longer trying to avoid being seen because it's pretty obvious when you're taking a picture. And you're also not trying to be fast because it's kind of hard to be fast. And all of this took me a long time to not only understand, but embrace. And I'll tell you why and how I went about it. My struggles and solutions. Understanding that the X-Pro3 was meant to be a slower shooting experience was a difficult transition for me. I didn't want to take photos that way and I kept trying to figure out ways to make it work my way, which meant shooting faster, composing faster, and trying to be quicker with it. A large part of this was because I'm uncomfortable shooting slow, especially in street photography. I've mentioned this before, but I don't like to be seen taking a photo. I feel like it causes for awkward interactions, being noticed, and can oftentimes ruin the moment. And I found myself getting frustrated at times because much of this could have been avoided if this camera just had a normal screen, right? Like I found myself thinking, was I dumb for buying this camera? Because the camera itself is cool, but if it makes photography harder for me, then what's the point? But after many months of taking photos with the X-Pro3, I stopped trying to fight it. I told myself, I know I could always sell this camera later, but for now, let's try to pretend as if this was the point. It's like the camera saying, hey, you gotta embrace it. Putting the camera to your eye is a noticeable action. People can tell you're taking a picture. Now what? Are you just not going to take the photo or are you going to sit there and embrace it? Because that's what it is. The X-Pro3 is a bit weird, especially if you're used to many other cameras that have a normal screen. So you have to figure out how to be more patient and take the photo only when you see the shot is happening. Otherwise, it's a wasted movement and wasted exposure. So that's what it feels like to me when I'm taking photos. Obviously, this depends on your photography and environment, and your experience with this camera will probably be different. But that was my main struggle with this camera, and here was my proposed solution. I figured that if I was going to need more time to take a shot anyways, maybe I could try that with a tighter focal length. Because I was doing a lot with the 33mm, but maybe something like a 50 would be more suited towards this type of photography. So let's talk about that. 50mm photography. The XF 50mm f2 was a lens I picked up to fill this gap in my photography. I had a hunch that if I needed to slow down to shoot mainly viewfinder anyways, a longer lens might help with that. That way, I didn't need to be so close to my subjects. And a review will be coming soon on this lens itself, so stay tuned for that. But for now, we'll just be speaking about it in the context of the X-Pro3. Using the X-Pro3 with the 50mm solved a lot of problems. But like many solutions, they also have many problems of their own. You simply can't have it all. With the 50mm f2, I was indeed able to compose my images more slowly, patiently, and intentionally from afar. However, I ironically found myself with an opposite habit when using this lens. Because I didn't need to get close, I didn't try to get close. Which sounds so stupid, but it's true. In situations where I had to get closer with the X106 or the 33mm f1.4, I moved my feet and walked closer. But with the 50mm, you don't really need to. And so unless you constantly remind yourself to get closer, you'll stay comfortably at a distance. All of which could lead to less intimate and worse photos. So that's been my experience. The 50mm helped me with this slower process, but also fed into other bad habits of mine. I've also noticed that the focal length is too tight for most everyday scenarios. Meaning it's a great focal length, but it's more situational than something like the 35mm or 23mm. APS-C sized. I can do street portraits and things like that from afar, but I can't really take photos of like a cup of coffee or my food or whatever. And if you're sitting across the table from a friend, you don't really want to use a 50mm because it's too tight and you'll be zooming on everything here. So I figure it's a good lens to bring along with you, but maybe not as a main all-purpose sort of lens. So now my current strategy is to continue to use the X-Pro3 with a variety of lenses that I have and sort of learn more from that experience. Slowing down, being intentional, and being seen. And in this process, I hope to learn to be more patient and comfortable in street photography. And if all else fails, I might sell the camera. Final thoughts. After using this camera for many months, I've learned a lot about my own photography. And I think that overall, that's a good thing. I've learned that there's a time to be quick and decisive with your photography, and there's a time to be slow and intentional. And although I love the X100V and the 6 for their speed, I have gotten into bad habits of quick photography, all of which I've been trying to counteract lately by intentionally slowing down my photography, really trying to align, frame, and perfect the shot before I take the picture. And so the X-Pro3 has sort of helped with that because I'm forced to do that. And again, you don't need an X-Pro3 to do this. You could simply remind yourself to slow down and compose more intentionally. Or you could grab whatever camera you already have and just turn off the screen. Another upside of using this camera is that it's made me a bit more bold. I'm slowly embracing being seen taking photos, and that's fine. This is what I do, who cares if people see me? It's a weird mental battle I have with myself, but it exists. Yes, I'm here taking pictures. So what? I'm going to do it, take my time to get the right shot, and that's that. So my final thoughts are, I like this camera. It's a fun camera to use, but it does have its own quirks. And I do see what they were doing with this camera, but I can't really say whether it's better or worse because not having a screen at times can suck. And this entire experience we've been talking about wouldn't exist if this camera just had a normal screen. So that's why I'm stressing that the viewfinder experience isn't necessarily better. And understand that the Fujifilm X-Pro3 is not for everyone. For the niche photographer, it could be perfect. But for the normal photographer who just needs a good working camera, I don't know if I could recommend it. It's got its quirks, its shortcomings, and you gotta consider those things before buying this camera. Which is a shame because I really do like the idea of this camera. I think if Fujifilm continued the process and aimed for an X-Pro4, they could really make something special. But as of right now, we have no idea whether or not there will actually be an X-Pro4. I feel like most of their attention is spent on building other more popular cameras. So those are my thoughts. The Fujifilm X-Pro3 could be a niche photographer's dream or another photographer's nightmare. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this helped. If you did, please share this with a friend. If you want to learn more, you can join the newsletter in the link down below. And if you're interested in photography books, check out The Sinking Sun, which is my latest photography zine. And while you're at it, you can get a free 4x6 print. The link for that is somewhere. Thanks for watching as always. Have a great day. I'll see you guys in another video. Peace.